Hello and welcome back to Will, A Wonderful World. Today we're going to start with this, Cell 28, not Call 28, and Life Unknown. I sat on the bottom bed of the only bunk in the tiny room. I held my head in my hands, thinking about the most baffling question of the moment. Why was I in prison? About half a day ago, 2 policemen had arrested me on the street. They put me in their patrol car and brought me straight here, Hong Kong Central Prison. No one would answer any of my questions, and they beat me up whenever I showed any resistance. Then they just threw me inside this empty room. There was nothing in here except a bunk bed, a wooden desk, a sink, and a toilet. It didn't even have a window. I suppose this was what they called a jail cell. Cell 28, open up. The door opened from the outside. Someone came in. Right, it must be a prank by Ren and the guys. They were probably just trying to give me a good scare. They must be getting me out now. However, the person that came in had a pale face whiter than the wall and a pair of lips redder than blood. They were also wearing a strange long robe. It was a ghost. I'd always been afraid of ghosts since I was a little kid. I jumped onto the bed and hid under the blanket, trembling in fear. Get out, your bed is the one on top. Don't lie on mine, how dirty. I heard a soft voice from outside the blanket. It actually sounded like a human. I climbed out of bed and stood aside, watching the new person change into the prison uniform and wash himself. He seemed to be right at home. Soon the scary ghost had become a short young man with a clean haircut and an innocent-looking face. Okay, so maybe not quite the right voice to give him. He was my cellmate, Hotaru. Although we had just met, Hotaru was a really easygoing guy, and he immediately told me everything about how he had ended up here. Hotaru was from Japan. He had a long-term girlfriend from China. The only problem was that the girl came from a very prestigious family. They didn't approve of Hotaru. However, they still kept seeing each other in secret. They would fly across the sea every once in a while just to be together. Eventually they realized that they would never receive her family's blessings, so they decided to elope. Unfortunately, just when they were finally ready to run away together, the girl was killed in an accident. Hotaru was devastated. Being so far away in Japan, he didn't even know what had really happened to her. He came to Hong Kong and tried to talk to the girl's relatives and friends that he knew, hoping to piece together the clues. His efforts finally paid off. In the end, he learned that one of her family members was responsible for her death. She was merely collateral damage in a vicious power struggle. Hotaru wanted to avenge her death, but he didn't have any power or any connections in this distant land. He had to seek help. He remembered a professional assassin he had known in Japan. He was famous for his creative ways of eliminating targets. Some people referred to him as the magician. He also had a strange hobby: old adult magazines. Zuko. Hotaru was able to find out that the magician happened to be in Hong Kong at the time too. However, hiring him required lots and lots of money, which Hotaru didn't have. Hotaru began to do everything he could for money. Inevitably, he dabbled in some illegal activities. Eventually, he was caught and thrown into prison. He still wouldn't stop. To him, the prison was just another society, not unlike the one outside. It was populated by plenty of residents with all kinds of different values. It wasn't just the guards or the warden. Even some of the prisoners might have unusual and powerful backgrounds behind them. Hotaru hustled among these people. He was willing to do everything and anything for a profit. He smuggled contraband, he traded information with the prisoners, he gambled with them. He bribed the guards, complimented them, sometimes even sold his own body. Hotaru said as long as he could get his revenge, he didn't care about himself at all. He began to choke up. I was so angry after hearing his story. I was also feeling both admiration and sympathy towards Hotaru. If I were in his shoes, I probably wouldn't be able to do what he had done. Unfortunately, I had no more than a few $100 on me, and that was all I could give him for now. I believed every word Hotaru had told me. The next day, during lunchtime, I was mocked relentlessly by the other prisoners. Son, you should be thankful that you only had a few $100 on you. I told you it was going to fall for it. Hurry, give me my 100. What kind of story did he tell you this time? Deceased parents? Although what he said, not entirely made up either. I hear 9 guards out of 10 here have played around with him. I was so angry that I dropped my spoon and ran back to my cell. Hotaru was sitting on the bed with his legs crossed, making a pyramid out of poker cards. You lying bastard! Give me back my money! Hotaru paid me no attention. He just put 2 more cards on top of the pyramid. A mini TV was playing a Japanese prank show near his knees. The sound of laughter came out of the TV right on cue, as if they were mocking me too. I stepped forward and turned off the TV. You monster! I dragged him off of the bed angrily. The pyramid of cards collapsed and they scattered all over the floor. The air in the cell seemed to have suddenly frozen. People began to gather right outside the cell. A tall, strong guard walked in through the crowd. I recognized him. He was the one who had taken my mugshot when I came in and searched my belongings. I seem to recall that he was from the UK. Everyone called him Morgan. I was about to tell Morgan what had happened when he punched me right in the face. Hotaru wasn't completely lying, at least. Everyone in here might have some kind of unusual background behind them. Why was I so unfortunate? Not only did I end up in prison, I also had to live with such a bastard of a cellmate. Lord, was this part of your trial for me? Carlos. Okay. Life unknown. 5 years wasn't really a long time, but when I looked down on Hong Kong from the airplane window, all I could remember was some fractured memories about this city. Everything I could remember about Hong Kong seemed to be connected to a coffee shop called Maple House. However, when I finally found the old address of the coffee shop, there was only a real estate agency at the location. I tried asking around the neighborhood, and people told me that the matron of the coffee shop had died in an accident. They also said a few regular customers had tried to keep the shop open in his name, but the landlord had refused to extend the lease. That meant that I didn't really have a reason to stay in the city any longer. I felt a little disappointed. Nevertheless, instead of wandering the streets aimlessly, I might as well go back to the UK sooner. My mental condition hadn't been very stable recently. If I suffered an attack here, my doctor friend half a world away wouldn't be of much help. For example, just earlier. No, actually, I couldn't even tell how much earlier just earlier really was. As far as I could remember, it had been a clear night. I was walking out of the alley in front of a coffee shop while I pulled my blazer tighter around myself. It was quite dark in the alley, except for the pale white moonlight shining down from above. I unintentionally looked up at the moon. Then, all of a sudden, I felt the moonlight getting whiter and brighter, and it was almost blinding. After a deafening moment of buzzing in my ears, I blacked out. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in the bed of the hotel room I had booked. On the other side of the same bed, another man with a scruffy face and long hair was lying down, snoring loudly with no inhibitions. Who was this man? Had he brought me back here? How would he even know that I'd been staying here? I nervously rummaged through his luggage. Besides a camera and some daily necessities, I also found a passport and a work ID. Apparently he was a policeman from Korea, maybe here as a tourist. Perhaps he was just a good Samaritan who had decided to return the lost item he had found by the road. After I calmed myself down, I realized that I was still wearing the same clothes as before I had left. The wrinkles on my clothes and the germs on the bed from the other man were both making me feel quite uneasy. In any case, I couldn't call for the room service before he left, so I decided to get changed first. I changed into my clean clothes and walked into the main room. I sat down and sunk deep into the soft couch. The digital clock on the table said it was almost 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. I decided to think about something before the man woke up. I used to want to become a doctor, but I never did. The reason was that while I had been studying for the qualification, I discovered that I had a serious condition. It was called selective cognitive dissonance. It was a hereditary disease. A person who suffered from this disease would selectively manipulate their own memories about people and events based on their own psychological cognition. Simply put, their own brain would tamper with their memories without their realizing it. When I first found out that I had this condition, I also realized that all of my memories might not be accurate or even true at all. I was terrified. I couldn't stop myself from second-guessing the truth of my own memories. I was in the UK at the time and I had a psychologist friend. He helped by treating me with his hypnosis therapy. The treatment allowed me to forget the unpleasant memories from my past. He told me that I was an entirely different person after the therapy. Afterwards, I had a few good years, but there were some side effects too. I couldn't remember what my parents looked like, nor where my home was. For the past 2 years there had also been more serious reactions too. Some fragmented, horrifying images would suddenly flash before my eyes, and I would feel severely sick or even pass out. My friend told me that the hypnosis might be wearing off, or that my condition might be deteriorating. Whatever the case, we decided to do another session after I had finished my trip and returned to the UK. I was staring at the TV opposite the couch when I suddenly sensed an inexplicable chill spreading over my entire body. It felt like the entire room was spinning, and I could hear nothing but an overwhelming buzzing in my ears. At the same time, a number of unimaginable visions were swirling through my mind. I could feel it. I could feel a crack opening in my brain, and something sicky, rotten, and pitch black was coming out of a cocoon. I was having a relapse. I held my arms tightly around myself. I knew I was about to completely lose control. There was a knife on the nearby desk. I could see my own reflection in the blank TV screen. My face was gradually overlapping with some of the gruesome visions in my head. It was too late. I remembered. I remembered everything. My parents' faces, my home, and my hellish childhood. The buzzing in my ears and the spinning were morphing into excruciating pain, pinching every single nerve in my body. Those bloody memories and the cruel truth that they implied were pushing me to the brink of my sanity. If I was on that edge, my illness would take over my mind and push me over the cliff. And then, history would repeat itself. I do not want to become someone I hated again. I cannot. I refuse. I must stop myself. I picked up the knife on the desk and stabbed myself in the throat at the perfect angle and the perfect depth. I could not afford to leave anything to chance. Goodbye. Dad, Mum, this world. I just hope that in my next life I could be a good, healthy child. Oh, that's just, from person that we do not know who it is. Alright, yeah. That's actually an interesting thing. If you have sort of depressing memories of the past, and you sort of make yourself forget them by hypnosis or, well, anything of that sort really. Probably could do that with medication, maybe? If they relapse, and don't 100% quote me on that because I'm not a medical professional, but I would think they relapse almost all of the time, eventually. Unless sort of you forgetting about them is caused by a medical issue as well, like amnesia, not necessarily, but Alzheimer's or something like that. Although you don't really forget way past things with Alzheimer's, or at least way later on than in the early stages of the disease. They will most of the time come back, and if they do, it's probably like just as if it happened to you the first time. Whereas if you keep them in your mind, you can get over them, you can overcome them most of the time, with help ideally, with a therapist or something like that. So I would think that being aware of them is the better choice if you can live with them. Obviously, if you can't, then, well, it's a tough choice. Let's try and solve the letters. There's not really much I can do anyway. Ooh. You know what? Show me what happens here. The policeman was no longer asleep. He was standing at the door to the bedroom. He was holding his head in his hands and looked confused and neurotic. He looked at me as if I had just done something despicable to him. However, I was the one who was really losing control. The image of him screaming monster at me lingered in my brain. Those horrifying fragments of memories were beginning to become even clearer. I couldn't control myself. I chuckled, then laughed, and then screamed. I felt some changes happening inside me, something not quite right. To make sure I could still control myself, I lunged at him. We were tangled together, hitting each other as hard as we could with our fists and feet. I needed to relieve what was piling up in my mind in the most primal way. I pushed his head away with my hand and slammed it into the TV screen, which then shattered into pieces. But I didn't win the fight. The black barrel of a gun was pushing up against my left temple. The person who was holding the gun had the same face as the policeman, but I could see something different, something much more frightening. You're a monster. He pulled the trigger, and those were the last words I ever said in this world. I looked at the fruit knife and I had an idea. I decided to swallow my anger for now. Later that night, I was lying on the top bunk, waiting with my eyes open. Hotaru turned in his sleep. The entire bed shook violently and I heard a panicked scream under me. I looked down, feigning ignorance. The bottom bunk only had a metal frame left. There were a few broken pieces of wood on the floor, and the screws that I had loosened up earlier were lying innocently in the corner of the cell. Hotaru sat on the floor in shock, still processing what had just happened. Haha, you sucker. Back at the orphanage, there had been a fat little kid who would always bully me. I once taught him a lesson in the same way. Although I was scolded by Alicia, it still felt really good. They needed a week to fix the bottom bunk. In the meantime, Hotaru was temporarily moved to another cell. Being in the cell alone was quiet. Too quiet. I used to sleep in the top bunk in the orphanage and Alicia would sleep on the bottom one. It wasn't a sturdy bunk bed. Alicia would have to hold the bed every time I climbed up. Otherwise it felt like the bed would immediately topple over. Oh, how I wished that I would find her sleeping down there when I woke up. I flipped the wet pillow, lay my head on it again and closed my eyes. I had to seriously start thinking about what to do next. Huh. Interesting that that's an A. What about this? The image of the woman on TV hysterically screaming monster lingered in my eyes. Why was I having such a strong reaction to this word? A few blurry visions were beginning to come together in my head. Some of them were starting to become even clearer. There was a room without lights, a man who looked like a doctor, and me as a child. He was a monster, and his actions destroyed my sense of self. When we clashed with each other, only one could survive. I felt some changes happening inside me. It felt so good, as if a group of people had been tolerating a smoker in an enclosed space, and then the smoker was suddenly killed by a falling meteor. I left the hotel. I walked in the middle of the street under the pale moonlight. I used to believe God was real when I was a kid, but if he or she were real, none of those things would have happened to me. People like me, we didn't really need a God, we just needed a dagger. I decided to stay in Hong Kong. There must be a lot of people here who could use a dagger like this, a dagger like me. Alright. He looks like grown-up Park Sang-gun, and sort of the story in the background match. The only problem I have is, Park Sang-gun wasn't from the UK, was he? Though again, he did say that his memories weren't matching up. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised if this was the same person. Alright, what do we have next? We don't have any new post. This is what I need to click. Alright. I cannot access this because I don't have this. And to get this, I need one of Spotty's messages that I don't have yet. The thing is, can I wait? History. Do I don't think I got anything new from here, did I? Did I need? Yeah, I couldn't access this yet. Which begs the question, what am I supposed to do? I can just try to get more memories, I guess. Or not memories, more... I guess they are memories, more solutions to these puzzles. Let me actually see here. There's nothing new I got here, right? No. It's just the same thing I had before. So, I mean, there's a couple things here, but there's no alternative. I'll make a cut here and I'll come back. I'll experiment a bit and I'll see what I can figure out.